If you enjoy our content and think this is important material, the best compliment you can pay is by sharing this with your friends and family. This helps us out a lot. Also, if you enjoyed today's program, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to this podcast. We would love to hear from you. The Truth in My Days podcast is sponsored by the Truth in My Days ministry. Welcome to the Truth in My Days podcast, where we defend the Word of God against the challenges of men.
Hello all. Today we have Sonia interviewing John about literary dependence and the synoptic problem. This is looking at the process by which the gospel authors went about writing the gospel books. Given that the gospel books are so similar, particularly Matthew, Mark, and Luke, it raises the questions such as, do they copy each other? Are the similarities due to the divine inspiration from the Holy Spirit? What do the evangelical scholars say about this? Is there something wrong with their approach? John will be looking to answer these questions and more. We're continuing from the previous episode today. We hope you enjoy!
Here is from James M. Robinson, Professor of Religion and Director of the Institute for Antiquity and Christianity at the Claremont Graduate School. Now you ask what's in Q. According to James M. Robinson, this is what's in Q. This old saying's gospel was not like the canonical gospels, so colored over with the charisma of cross and resurrection that the historical Jesus, though embedded therein, was actually lost from sight by the heavy overlay of golden patina. Now that's scholarly gobbledygook for what?
So I suppose they're saying that Q doesn't have a resurrection and Jesus is just a regular guy.
They're saying that, and as well, you see, they're assuming, or they're putting an entailment meaning here, that there was no resurrection. There was no cross, there was no resurrection. You see, that was embedded in the gospel books that we do have. You can't believe those. Those are fictitious. So the canonical gospels, you see, are full of these legendary accretions and embellishments, so much so that you can't even really know who the historical Jesus is. Good thing we have Q to tell us, eh?
Yeah, except that we don't.
But Robinson will tell us what's in it. Rather, this document, he's talking about Q again, this document was just primitive enough to contain many sayings of Jesus without charismatic overlay and without the Q redactor's own additions. Here, the real Jesus, who actually lived in history, has his say.
What do they mean by the Q redactor?
Yeah, it's the Q redactor, because you see, Q also was put together, assembled by some editor. It wasn't written by Jesus himself. He didn't put these sayings to paper, so somehow these sayings were floating around, different people repeating them, and somebody collected them and put them together into a document. That's the redactor. It's another word for editor.
So now there's a Q and an edited Q?
Well, the Q is what was put together by the editor. The sayings were oral. They had to be put down on papyrus, and they were done by somebody who decided which ones to put in and in what order. And until then, there's no written document called Q. Charismatic overlay, that's from charisma, which is that which is preached, from keruso, right? So what he's saying is that in Q, we find Jesus sayings without charismatic overlay. In other words,
he's not preaching?
No, we find Jesus sayings without being overlaid by what the church was preaching, like the cross and the resurrection. Now, one might ask, why was the church preaching that? Why were Jesus' followers preaching the cross and the resurrection if these were not part of the original story?
Well, I guess their excuse is that the Gospels are written late, so they're just legends added later.
But Q, when was Q written? Well, had to be before Matthew and Luke, because, hey, that's where they got that material from. So here they say it's the real Jesus.
So basically what happened is somebody takes the non-common material from Synoptic Gospels, writes them in a different document, and calls it Q and publishes it to the world as if this is a separate manuscript, or what?
You mean the scholars now?
Yeah. So that fools the public. So they think
That
there's an
would be
actual
their
Q.
starting point. Yes, they would take the material that's common to Matthew and Luke, but not in Mark. And they'll tell you it's a sayings gospel then, so it's mainly just sayings of Jesus, not deeds. So you see, very convenient to get rid of the miracles that way.
Okay, so they take that material and they just remove all the miracles, and that's their text of Q?
Pretty much, yes. But then they will try to argue about what else would have been in there. For example, you see here, continuing in these claims from James Robinson, he says, although the sayings gospel had no passion narrative or resurrection stories, and let's stop right there and ask you, if we don't have a document of Q, how could we know what it included?
Well, I guess they're, like we just said, I suppose they take that material in 2 of the Gospels, but not 3, and that is what they claim is the Q, right?
Yes, but even if we could say that all that material came from Q, that would tell us that this material is in Q. It wouldn't tell us what else is or is not in Q.
Because we don't have a manuscript.
Exactly. So there's no basis, even if Q existed, which it doesn't, but even if it existed, we could not possibly know its full extent. Perhaps that resurrection, crucifixion, passion account in Matthew or in Luke, perhaps Matthew or Luke got it from Q. Maybe it was in there. How could we possibly know? How could we possibly boldly assert that the sayings gospel has no passion narrative or resurrection stories?
Well, what they say then is because, well, that part was copied from one of the other gospel writers, and if it had been in Q, they wouldn't have bothered to go to 2 sources, and they would have gotten it from Q where they got their other material too.
But here's the thing, they don't know where Matthew got his. That's why they've invented this M source, and they don't know where Luke got it from, so they've invented an L source, but maybe it was Q. How can you know it wasn't there?
Maybe it was an E source, an eyewitness source.
Well, we know in reality, yes, it was. But then Robinson continues, this omission does not necessarily lead to the conclusion that the Q people knew nothing of Jesus' fate or had never thought about where it left them. It is hardly probable that his death was not quickly rumored among his followers, even into the most obscure corners of Galilee. But then, after his death, was not the only sensible thing to do to give up the whole thing as some tragic miscalculation, a terrible failure? What do you think? Would that be the only sensible thing to do?
Well, not if he rose from the dead.
Yes, but if he didn't rise from the dead.
Yeah.
Yes, that would in fact be the only sensible thing, because a messianic claimant, a Jewish messianic claimant who dies and stays dead, proves himself thereby to be a fake. Even the Bible talks about this in Acts chapter 5, where Gamaliel is referring to 2 people, and they're known from history, Theudas and Judas of Galilee, who both made great claims, raised followers, were killed by the Romans, and after that their followers scattered, and they came to nothing. I've shown you that book, 50 Jewish Messiahs, and this lists 51 people through the ages who claim to be the Jewish Messiah. And they died, and nobody follows them today. Nobody's even heard of them, except some very, very specialized historians have even heard of the names. You might have heard of 1 or 2, like Shimon bar Kokhba, but most of them we've never even heard of, because when they die, people stop following them. It is the only sensible thing to do. Why would you follow somebody who promises you that he can beat death for you when he couldn't beat it for himself? Even more recently, Rabbi Menachem Schneerson, in 1994, the Rebbe of the Lubavitcher sect of Judaism, his followers, many of them thought he was the Messiah. And when he died in 1994, during his funeral, people were actually asking him, rise from the dead, come back, so we'll know. Well, who today is preaching Menachem Schneerson as the Messiah? Who's coming to believe in him? Where are the thousands of people who are believing that Schneerson is the Messiah? They're not there. It is the only sensible thing to do because it means he's a fake.
Okay, so it seems like in the case of Schneerson and Jesus, it's not quite the same test. So with Schneerson, you have a bunch of people there seeing a confirmation that he's not the Messiah because he did not rise. Whereas with Jesus, you had some people seeing him after the resurrection, seeing that, in fact, he did rise, but you didn't ever have a pile of people seeing that, no, for sure, he did not rise. So then it only becomes a question of believing those eyewitnesses, I guess.
Well, yes, that is the fundamental difference. People saw Jesus put to death. He was definitely dead. That Roman spear that went into his side and blood and water came out is absolute proof that he was indeed dead. They saw him buried, and on the third day after, they saw him alive again. And across 40 days, he presented himself alive by many infallible proofs. He appeared to over 500 people. And then these were not just sightings out of the corner of your eye of somebody like darting into Tim Hortons or something. They spent time with him. They ate with him. They talked with him. So they were absolutely certain. And that's when they went out and preached. There's not one person saying, oh, yeah, Schneerson showed up to me. Yeah, we had lunch together. He was not there for 40 days, showing himself alive by many infallible proofs. This is the point. Schneerson has no eyewitness testimony that was back from the dead. And nobody follows him anymore. Maybe a few of his original followers are still clinging to some kind of hope, but nobody's saying he came back from the dead. Nobody's converting to him. Nobody's out there preaching him. This is what always happens. The idea that after his death, the only sensible thing to do is to give up the whole thing as some tragic miscalculation, terrible failure, is indeed reality. And that's what's always happened, and that's what always would happen. So when Robinson now tries to spin some different ending to this, it just makes no sense. Listen to this. Robinson again. Jesus had assured them, the Father from heaven gives good things to those who ask him, and yet his last word, according to Mark, was, my God, why have you left me in the lurch? Mark 15:34. That's his translation, and we know that was not his last words. In Mark, his last words were he commanded his disciples to go out and to preach, and these signs would follow. Again, back to Robinson. What was there left to proclaim? The emergence of the sayings gospel was, to put it quite pointedly, itself the miracle at Easter.
How does anyone know when the supposed sayings gospel was released?
That's not the point. The point is, we don't have a physical bodily resurrection. A man who told that he was God, the Son, that he would come back from the dead, and did it. No. He died, but hey, somebody put down some of his pithy little sayings. That's the miracle.
Thank you, everyone, for listening today. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, but please join us for the next part tomorrow. Same time and same place. Thank you for listening to the Truth in My Days podcast with John Torse. If you like our content, please share this information with family and friends. It helps us a lot. We also would love to hear from you. You can reach us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube by searching Truth in My Days as one word again. Truth in My Days as one word. No spaces in between. Or reach us by email at info@truthinmydays.com. You may also visit our website for more comprehensive material and to learn more about our ministry. Our website is truthinmydays.com. Thank you.